the volatility in the market. Can you talk about that in our quality? What kind of measures have been taken? And secondly, on the restructuring 2.0, what kind of response have we got to the in the month of May and June, and what kind of escalation we can see in the RBI RE book, let's say in the next quarter, or is the worst done in terms of restructuring?
Yeah, Anuj, coming to the first question, credit filter. This is a kind of continuous activity. As part of portfolio management, we always change the filters. Wherever we see a kind of stress or delinquency higher than an acceptable level, we do make changes. Some broad level changes happened twice last year, one in May and one in November. That has ensured that the new acquisition is of acceptable quality. So, apart from the big changes, some kind of micro level changes will continue to happen. Particularly, we do source sizable segment from banca, particularly NTC. So, I think recently we have seen some small increase in delinquency where we have tightened the filter, introduced some additional documentation requirements so as to be sure that we are getting a right customer segment. So that way, the changes to credit filters is a continuous activity. Coming to your second question, RBI RE 2.0. Actually, RBI issued the circular in May, and we got the policy approved through board in June. So our dispensation was available only in the first week of June. So we saw a demand. Initial days we saw a good demand of around 258 crores is the portfolio. Kind of RBI RE 2.0 restructuring portfolio. We have based on the request received from the customers, and after evaluating their suitability and eligibility, we restructured around 258 crores. Which in a way, if you compare, our earlier portfolio was around 2,700 crores last year. So that way it is not even 10%. And what we have seen now in July is the requests have come down. It is not at the same level, and we don't see a kind of situation of having the same portfolio like last year, definitely. But it's too early to comment. The flow has come down as compared to June.
Understood. And sir, one more if I may. The cost of funds at 5.2% is, it's a very impressive number. How should we see this number panning out during the course of the, let's say, next 3 quarters?
I think to the credit of my finance team, Nalin and his treasury team, they have managed this cost of funds very well. Whatever opportunities were there in terms of shedding the high cost borrowings or high cost facilities and then substituting with the low cost, they used it fully. All those opportunities were leveraged. But given the kind of current macroeconomic situation where inflation is ruling high, I think perhaps the scope for further reduction in the cost of funds will be very limited. That is what our internal feeling is. While RBI kind of accessibility that is prevalent in the system may continue to support, but if inflation continues to be high, then I think there may be a juncture where policy rates may get revised. This is our opinion. Then correspondingly the borrowing rates will also increase. But as long as the rates are, liquidity is good, and as long as current economic environment, current rate environment prevails, we will continue to look for opportunities. And I think, Nalin, in the investor deck we have given the borrowing percentage versus the overall, long term versus the short term. Just to give you some comfort that we have increased the percentage of long term borrowings from 28 to 34%. 34%. But while the cost of funds overall has come down, our long-term borrowings have actually, as a percentage, they increased from 28 to 34. So we are constantly looking for opportunities, and that's the endeavor to keep the cost of funds low as low as possible.
Understood. Thank you very much, sir. All the best.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Amit Nanavati from Nomura. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi. So just a couple of questions. Firstly, just want to understand the linkage between your spends recovery and the revolver book, right? So even if I look at last year, in the second half we had roughly around 70% kind of increase in the overall book, but if I look at the revolver book per se, that was down, and even if I kind of add back the RBI RE book and add back the write-off there, it was still down like 3 odd percent in versus 2Q 21, 4Q versus 2Q. So just want to understand, once you come out of wave 2 impact, once things recover, typically, just more theoretically, firstly, how long does it take to kind of come back in terms of optimum revolver mix? And secondly, more strategically also, we would have chosen to keep the revolver book lower by optimizing your customer mix. So in that sense, more at a practical level, how long does it take the revolver book to kind of improve and the margins to kind of recover?
Yes, I will just add a couple of lines, and Girish will supplement. If you look at our composition, transactor balances, revolver and EMI kind of balances, revolvers were pretty high at 45% as of June 2020. That was a result more of a moratorium, and the hardship tools were not available at that time. Only in August, only the restructuring tools were available. The moment the tools were available from August onwards, part of those balances got converted into EMI. But then we have also given a RBI RE walk where we were seeing a steady rundown in the portfolio. Some of it, of course, the standstill portfolio got written off, but RBI RE portfolio, we were able to see some robust payments till March 2021. So that brought down slowly the percentage of EMI. The RBI, I'm talking about RBI percentage. It was as high as 9% at one point of time, maybe in December 20, came down to 8% as of March 21, and now it has come down to 6%, despite RBI RE2 portfolio, new portfolio of 258 crores. So as this portfolio wears down, or otherwise as this portfolio pays off, to that extent you can see improvement in the revolvers. In fact, despite converting 258 crores of current balances into RBI RE, which is almost like a 1%, our revolvers improved in the quarter by 1%, 28 to 29%. So we always used to say like a BAU kind of scenario will be one third. Transactors reached that level, now it is 33%. But as RBI RE portfolio comes down, we can see some kind of reversion to the mean in terms of revolver balance.
So, just to add a couple of things there, from a quarter-on-quarter perspective, if you look at the movement, the asset primarily on the revolver portfolio is almost stable. There is an increase in the term asset balances, so which is the EMI portfolio on the balance. There is also, and this is despite the movement, as our MD sir mentioned, that you have movement of earlier revolvers going into RBI RE and the pay down. So despite those movements, the balance revolver is almost stable. There is a decrease in the transactor NE because of the impact of COVID, which was not there in the end of March, but you could see that part of that till the month of June, because June was also not fully COVID free. So that impact is also there. There is a decrease there. So that is why some mixed thing you see looking at this. The other question which you asked, what is the kind of time frame that we should look at from conversion perspective? There are two kinds of conversion there. One is when we look at new spends, we try to convert a good quality of that spends immediately into a EMI kind of a portfolio, which is either through subvention or FlexiPay products that we have. We see a good conversion rate there. So that is one way of conversion. The second is the revolving conversion, which happens and the asset which builds up over a period of time. That takes normally anywhere between 12 to 18 months to get built up.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Subramaniam Iyer from Morgan Stanley. Please go ahead.
Thanks for the opportunity. I had a question with the there was a jump this quarter to 1Q and suitability.
Your voice is not audible. It's breaking.
Is this better now?
Yeah, slightly.
Okay. So my question was with respect to the loan yield. So there's been quite a good improvement in this quarter, and obviously a lot of it has got to do with the favorable shift this quarter. So just wanted your thoughts on basically how do you think about the mix going forward, and also the shift in mix this quarter towards the term loans was a bit unexpected because obviously in a quarter like this we thought that term loans, which is probably at the peak desperation, might more towards term. So just wanted your thoughts on that, and also were there any other factors which also resulted in the improvement in the loan yield this quarter?
So we going forward, as was mentioned, we will look at a one-third mix once RBI RE gets completely paid off from the portfolio. This was a mix that with which we used to operate before the COVID period, and we had been operating with that mix for a fairly long time. So it was a consistent mix in a portfolio that we looked at that. We are seeing even now the movement is going towards that direction. So there are apart from, I think, some bit of revolving mix to be changed, but if you look at revolving RBI RE, which was actually a part of revolver earlier, then the mix would be approximately in the same one-third range. So we look at that. On the term loan perspective that you talked about, there is market consumer demand towards whenever large ticket items or mobile phones or some of these items are being purchased online, there is a very strong demand to convert into a EMI kind of a portfolio. And subvention is working very nicely there. So we see customers converting their balances into installment, both at the point of sale as well as later on. So that demand is very, very strong. Also, we have in this quarter we have very strongly looked at some of our good customers and looked at giving additional loan to those customers so that asset can be built there also, which is a product which we sell, which we call it Encash. So we build asset there also.
Okay, thanks for that. Just a follow-up question on the reduction in the RBI RE book. If you can split that reduction of 789 crores into basically write-offs and actual repayments.
Yeah. This out of 789 crores, I think bulk of it is the RBI RE portfolio NPA, which was outstanding for more than 90 days. I think around 600 crores, 647 crores was outstanding as of March 2021. Normal situation, we would have resolved at least a part of it. But given the kind of situation, second wave, I think most of it has actually was charged off. So that is mostly it is the RBI RE NPA portfolio, and that is also one of the reasons why, as a proactive measure, we increased the ECL provision for more than 90 days from 80% to 100% based on the recent experience.
Mr. Subramanian Iyer, we are sorry, but we cannot hear you, sir.
Sorry. No, I said thanks a lot. I mean, that answers all my...
Thank you so much. The next question is from the line of Karthik Chellappa from Buena Vista Fund Management. Please go ahead. Mr. Karthik Tillappa, please go ahead with the question.
We are not able to hear anything, Rituja. Rituja, why don't we move to the next question on the queue?
Yes, sir. Just give me a moment.
Rituja, we can't hear you. Are you able to hear us?
Sir, yes, I can hear you. Just give me a moment. So please give me a moment. I'm facing some technical glitch.
Rituja, can the group hear us or no one can hear us?
Yes, sir. The group can hear you. I'm sorry, but the problem is from my side. There is a network glitch because of which the participants, I am unable to promote them in the queue.
Okay.
Please give me a moment. Please just allow me a few moments, sir.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are facing some technical issues. Please stay connected. It will be getting fixed shortly. Participants, please stay connected with us. Due to some technical issues, we are facing problems. Please stay connected. We will doing the backup.
Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the inconvenience caused. We will now begin the question and answer session. Anyone who wishes to ask a question may enter star and 1 on their touchtone telephone. If you wish to remove yourself from the question queue, you may press star and 2. Participants are requested to use handsets while asking a question. Anyone who has a question may enter star and 1. We'll take our next question from the line of Bhavik Dave from Nippon India Mutual Fund. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, good evening, sir. Sir, I have two questions. One is on your incremental customer additions that we are doing. This quarter, we've had significant additions via the non-bank or the open market channel. And if you look at the various breakups, we've either added more salarized, more category A type customers with a little younger age of like 30 and above, 30 and below. And also, if you look at the geography mix, it's more tier one. So is there anything specific, any new channel that we found which is leading to getting back to maybe a different type of customer segment during the quarter? If you could just talk about that.
Yes, Mr. Bhavik. Entire last year, our banker channel contributed more than 50% to our incremental sourcing. But this quarter, it so happened like a lot of restrictions were there in so many states, including states putting restrictions on the operating hours of branches, which came in the way of sourcing through this channel. Because even the customers were hesitant, and even the branch team was also functioning only for part of a day in some of the states, particularly in May and the end of April. That came in the way of sourcing by a banker channel. So that was the reason open market, of course, did not have the challenges to the same degree. So they continued with the acquisition, and that was the reason open market accounts for maybe more than 65% and 35% roughly from banker. And banker earlier, because we always work with the Shikhar model, and tier 3, tier 4 we were targeting through the Shikhar model, where we had the benefit of that auto debit and auto sweep. So cities-wise, tier 3, tier 4 had a significant contribution in the last year. But because the banker sourcing itself has come down, now it will appear like a open market is always active in tier 1 and tier 2 only. So that contribution will appear like that got increased. So it is not like a specific strategy. It is more around our inability to operate banker at the same level at which it was operating in the last year.
And sir, if you could just talk about, we've seen that last 7-8 quarters we had very good sourcing by the banker channel. If you could just give qualitatively, help us understand how is the customer behavior there been, how is the spend behavior been, because those customers are also now getting online on the various apps or various e-commerce websites. How has the graduation of these customers been over the last 7-8 quarters? If you could just help us understand the balances or the spends have increased from these customers that we acquired via the banker channel over the last 7-8 quarters.
So the way that we have been acquiring banker customer, as was mentioned, is through the Shikhar program. We run this Shikhar program in various batches. So we do it in program, I think at this point in time, number 17 or 18. We take different kinds and sets of customers in each Shikhar program, basis either a savings account or let's say a set of wealth customers. So we look at those each Shikhar program like in that separate sense. What we have, however, seen across the portfolio is that people who become active and start using the card, their spend per card is broadly similar, slightly lower than the normal open market customer in that city. So there is always a tiering level, because tier 1 spends are higher, customers in tier 1 spends are higher, tier 3 are slightly lower. The low, and even when we look at the breakup, the online spends are broadly similar. It is the issue at the point of sale, because the number of point of sale terminals are not that much available in tier 3, and the need is also usually not that much. Because the local grocer or the shop owner and those kind of things. Yes. So but online spend is broadly similar. Where we were seeing some challenges were in terms of getting the customer to start using the card and activating the card. So we've been doing a lot of programs. What we see is that it does take time for some of these customers to start using the card, but we have now figured out that as the customer comes on board, doing an onboarding session, talking to the customer, explaining the product does help. So we have put in those set of programs. The second thing which I want to highlight is that the asset build-up in some of these customers in tier 3 is slower compared to a tier 1, tier 2 or already carded customer. So the balance for a mature customer does almost become similar, but the maturity time frame is slightly longer for these customers.
Sure. And so second question is on the EMI part. When we are seeing more and more customers both at the POS terminal and also the balance is getting converted into EMI. If you could just talk about what are the rough yields that we charge, like maybe at the POS terminal or when we convert the revolver like the balances into EMIs, and how long does this book stick around? Like is the average duration 12 months or lower? Anything to read into that?
So we do not convert revolving balance into installment lending because that is not the right way. So customers, if they are doing their fresh
आप
spend,
जिस व्यक्ति से बात कर रहे हैं उसने आपकी कॉल को होल्ड.
Sorry, sir, it was Mr. Singh's line that went on hold. We placed him on mute right now. You may proceed.
If the customer is spending, doing fresh spends on the card, then what we charge is 14%, and we also get the interchange on that transaction. So these are the two income streams that we make on those transactions. On the tenor part of it, the average tenor of people converting into installment lending at the point of sale is close to 8 months. So it's a short tenor thing. People prefer 6 months tenors or 12 months tenors primarily for conversion of new spends into installment balances.
Mr. Dave, I'm sorry, may we request you to return to the queue, please, as there are several participants waiting for their turn.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. We will take our next question from the line of Jaimin Shah from RWC Partners. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for the opportunity and quite commendable performance given the circumstances. I had two questions. The first question is on spends. Could you talk a bit on spends on how it's evolved from April, May, and June, and what you are seeing in July? And could you talk about the frequency, as in, in one of the slides you kind of show that, spends on more of a daily necessity kind of stuff has gone up quarter on quarter. What has kind of suffered is essentially the discretionary and more importantly, the services which were quite close. So I'm just trying to understand how you see the usage. Also, the data we see from RBI is on per transaction basis. The average ticket size has gone up significantly quarter on quarter, or even in the data we have until May. Any color that would be great there.
So when you read RBI data, you should look at it that spends is both retail spends as well as corporate spends or B2B spends. It will include, and the breakup is not given in the RBI data. So that way you will not be able to get a mix on that. Typically what happens is, for the retail spends, the ticket sizes are lower. For B2B spends or SME spends, the ticket sizes are higher. So that's the insight while you are evaluating the RBI data. While on the first part of the question that you asked, you are right. Couple of trends that we see here is that discretionary spends have gone down. They continue to be down at this point of time because travel, lodging, hotels, restaurants are still not there. It is the non-discretionary items are actually growing. What we see is that online spends in Q1 in April, May, June actually on an absolute basis were also higher than what we saw in Q4. So there is a trend line for, as you can see on the slide which we had presented, 55% of the spend is almost online, and so trend is basically that the customer is now buying non-discretionary items online, and that is a consistent piece that we are able to see.
Right. Okay. Now that's helpful. And just on the asset quality side, your GNP or whatever your stage 3 includes all the RBI RE more than 90 days, right?
Yes, yes.
As in, it's inclusive, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. And I'm just trying to understand here the 258 crore you kind of gave that number is similar on management overlay and the RBI RE 2.0. So essentially, is it fair to say that you're kind of covering 100% of RBI RE2?
No, Jevin, there's just a coincidence that the numbers end up being the same. That is not intended to cover the fresh RBI RE. Like we mentioned earlier, the 258 crores that you see as management overlay is just the fact that we cover for any delinquent RBI RE at 65.2% and any NPA RBI RE, we are right now covering it 100%. It's a sum total of both. The fact that it is exactly equivalent to that is just a coincidence.
Okay, no worries. Thanks, Adan. Very helpful.
Thank you. We'll take our next question from the line of Bharat Shah from ASK Investment Managers. Please go ahead.
Two questions. First, you said that per se desired mix that you aim for is about 1/3 each, transactor, revolver, and EMI. But why would you desire 1/3 to be revolver of necessity? I mean, does it have an impact on the way you assess the credit and the kind of you take a bit more liberal stance and issue cards accordingly? If the idea is to earn the interest income, will it not structurally result into an issue at some stage?
So when we said 1/3, it's primarily what we have seen from the consumer behavior over a period of time. And we are talking about this after demonetization, where we have seen that there are customers who are not, and we are not talking about habitual revolvers or chronic revolvers or consistent revolvers. People these days, if you have to, let's say, if you purchase a thing, as I was mentioning earlier, there are rates are available as low as 14% to 18%, where the customer can convert into installment lending product. So customers who still revolve are either looking at it for a very short-term working capital requirement. So what they're looking at is that if they're able, they will be able to pay the outstanding within 2 months. So that's the kind of thought process with which they revolve. Yes, you are right. Every customer who goes into finally a loss ultimately revolves before that. So that is a slow path. But from a consumer behavior, what we have seen for last 4 or 5 years consistently is that if the customer wants to pay back and he has a planned thing, then there are installment lending products. That's why they have become 1/3. 6 years, 7 years back, this number used to be almost close to 0. So this is a trend in last 4 or 5 years that it has happened. So revolving is where the customer need is getting fulfilled for a very short-term period. There are some sloppy payers also, people who forget to pay their outstanding at the due date, so they will go into a revolving model and then come back and then pay back. So there are those customers also.
But I thought I heard you saying that you prefer it this way. It's not an outcome of the consumer behavior, but probably you prefer it to be 1/3 each, which is what I was a bit curious about. Why would you structurally expect 1/3 people to revolve? Because that will then have an impact on the way you assess or judge the credit risk before issuing the card and all of that, I would have thought.
So let me clarify that further. We don't expect 1/3 of the customers to revolve. This 1/3 is of the asset. And that's the number of customers revolving is actually far lesser, much lesser. So this is how the trend line that we have seen over a period of time. And what it also does is, if the mix of asset is broadly in this 1/3 range, the yields which you finally get are in the space where our business model is rightly positioned.
Okay. And secondly, when I structurally look at your business, well, it is designed for a very superior ROE, which typically most lenders can never hope to get, because a substantial part of the income comes from the card spends. And typically what we've seen is your non-interest income covers all your expenditure rather than the provisions. So therefore, structurally, that's a very superior business. If it fundamentally takes care of all the expenses, it's a practically very, very high ROE activity. And interest earning income portion also has a high interest component ranging from EMI to your defaulting revolving customer all the way to 36 or 6 Therefore, if your your credit losses are kept in check, even that part of the lending activity is a superior ROE activity. If the two things we put together, can we kind of say that structurally you should make more than 30% return on equity on a perpetuity, if not a higher number than that?
So thanks. This is the business model. You're right. Wouldn't like to comment on the perpetuity bit at this point of time, definitely. Yes, right now we are impacted just like everybody else with the COVID, and we have stress book. So that is there. But yes, you're right. In terms of business model, this business can generate higher returns than most of the business because the income earning capacity per dollar of asset is definitely better than any other lending business or payment business that you can think of.
Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Bharat Shah. May we request you to please return to the queue as there are several participants waiting. Thank you. We'll take our next question. That's from the line of Mahesh MB from Kotak Securities. Please go ahead.
Good evening, sir. Just two questions from my side. So the question is, if you start seeing more number of transactions on the online, and specifically it starts getting concentrated on a few websites, how have you started seeing any change from a revenue perspective for you?
No, not as of now. But we believe that this concentration is there online between, let's say, the two large online players. But as the point of sale gets opened up, we believe that point of sale will increase. The second thing is you should also note that, as mentioned, that there is a large set of categories are still not open. So the whole travel, the whole restaurants, the whole web card used to be a natural medium of payment. Those categories are not open, so they will also pick up. So it's quite well diversified from that perspective.
Just kind of extending that question. When there is sales which is happening on specific days around these platforms, do you have to kind of propose a specific incentive for them to be part of that, or how does it work?
So the way that it typically works is that if there is a cashback offer, because that is typically the offer which comes in with most of these large players, there is and that cashback is the customer value proposition. If the customer directly gets that benefit, part of that benefit is shared between the merchant, the manufacturer, and us. So there is a sharing arrangement which happens. So that's from a fiduciary perspective. Otherwise, advertising and other things are also looked at depending on who is able to put in what into the overall basket. So it's a commercial arrangement between three parties.
Yeah, my question was a little bit different. If there are three very large credit card issuers, does the website provider kind of decide as to who does he partner for this program, or all of them get an equal opportunity on how do you want to take this forward for that specific few days of sale?
See, end of the day, the program is being run by the website, so they can always individually do it or decide who amongst themselves. But we are a large player in this space, so almost all all these websites, they connect with us, and we are in regular contact with them for various programs.
So, second question to Aparna. When you look at the spends today, Aparna, if you could just kind of qualitatively comment, have you started seeing spends coming across all the set of clients which is there, whether it is prime, subprime? How are you seeing the spends coming or shaping up in your in the card base?
So the spends, I don't think we should be looking at it as prime, subprime, or any. But so one of the things we need to note is, like we mentioned earlier, there's a fair bit of dynamic portfolio management that we are doing. So if anybody is on the margin of, or they have a very high probability of becoming delinquent, then the requisite amount of credit actions have already been taken on these lines. The lines have been brought down, and if they're trying to do any specific high-risk transactions, those will get declined. So that kind of activity is happening. Now, so lines are available to spend only from the better customers. So we've not really seen any specific bunching of spends coming only from the lower score segments or anything like that. We haven't seen any such grouping of the spend.
Can you reverse the argument and say the spend that you're seeing today is almost similar to what you saw in 2018-19, or you think you've not reached that point?
No. It is not, because as I told you, there are certain categories which are completely shut at this point of time. They used to be mid-teens in the overall mix. So that is not there. The second thing also which you would note, which we have given in the presentation, is the categories like, for example, the whole non-discretionary set, which is your utility bills, telecom. Okay, so they are these categories are typically they are used by everybody. So, and the good part is that a large part of that was earlier going through cash, or for example, insurance payment through the insurance agents, where people were used to give checks and make the payments. Now, all that is coming on online and is happening by the customer, is being done by the customer regularly. So it's a very good sign actually from an overall digitization perspective.
Mr. Mahesh, may we request you to please return to the queue? Thank you. We'll take a next question from the line of Suresh Ganapathy from Macquarie. Please go ahead.
Yeah, just two questions. One is on the credit cost. If I were to really look at it, the last 2 quarters, it's been hovering around 10 to 11% of AUM. Do you think really the second half could see, of course, notwithstanding a third wave, but can we see a substantial reduction in these credit cost numbers for the later part of the year? I'm not asking for a specific number, but can we really see this coming down?
I think last time also in one of the interactions we said we expect a kind of a downward trajectory for the credit cost that was much before the second wave. So I think I can only say a second wave has actually delayed that downward journey, but the pace at which it will decline, etc., is a function of macroeconomic environment and we gaining the complete collection efficiency, like a BAU kind of efficiency we need to get back. Consumers also should be accessible, customers should also be accessible, but definitely the trajectory will be downward. I cannot comment on the slope part, how fast we will be able to reduce it. That we need to wait and watch. But over a period of time, as compared to May, the position in June was better, and again, as compared to June, July position is better.
Okay. Okay, so that's clear. The other part is, of course, this question has been asked in a different way by various participants. So let me also try to attempt this. There is a big debate that the BNPL customers are going to be $40-50 billion in the next 5 years. Have you seen some signs of aggressive pricing in the market, thereby you're compelled to do, or there is an issue of loss of market share in certain of these segments? I don't know, the industry data is actually not available, but how are you approaching this particular segment?
I think if you traditionally look at a kind of, at least our own company's internal experiences, I mean, typically the limits will be minimum 30 to 40,000 kind of limit from a unit economics perspective. Otherwise, it will not work out for us.
Okay.
But ENPL is in a totally different bracket where it starts with a very small amount of even 5,000 and may hover around 10,000, 12,000.
Mm-hmm.
With regard to the potential, if you don't rule out the potential, definitely the market will definitely increase. And mostly it's very popular with the millennials or otherwise the NPC kind of segment. But way forward will be perhaps some convergence will be there where the BNPL customers can potentially become customers of credit card once they build a good credit history. Or otherwise we will also be making journey towards it. So there will be a convergence point. But the question is like we have to use the right channel of acquisition, right value proposition has to be offered. So there will be convergence definitely over a period of time. We may have to have different product offerings to cater to that. We will also have to articulate some more risk appetite going forward. But we are waiting and watching, and then we will be calibrating our strategy based on the situation.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you. We would like to request participants to limit their questions to 2 per participant. Time permitting, you may come back in the queue for a follow-up question. Our next question is from Akriti Kakkad from Goldman Sachs. Please go ahead.
Hi, sir. Thank you for the opportunity. I have 2 questions. Starting with a quick one first. Do we utilize SBI YONO as a sourcing instrument? And if we do, could you please give us some idea around the proportion that is sourced from there?
Yeah, SBI YONO is definitely used. Both the app as well as there is an internal portal within the bank. So both are used because that's a more convenient way of getting information in respect of a customer who has given a mandate to the bank to share the information. So that is a preferred channel. That's definitely a preferred channel. And as of now, I think 20% of the sourcing happens through YONO.
20%?
Yeah, 20% of the sourcing happens through YONO, and it has potential for further increase.
All right, thank you. So, sir, I'm looking at slide 4 of the PPT, and in the total receivables, 32% is EMI. How much of it is converted at cost for the industry and for SBI cards?
We have not declared that asset balance. Out of this 32, how much is at the point of sale? But I can give you one indication that close to almost 10% of the spends, new spends, get converted into installment lending products.
Okay, all right. Okay. One last quick question, sir. So 29% is revolver here in the total receivables book. What is the duration of this revolver book?
It's about 3 to 4 months, okay? That's generally what we've seen in terms of how long the revolver stays the revolver.
All right. Sorry.
One point is that it's important to note that these are revolvers. So anybody paying between 5 and 100%, 99%. So we do have customers who revolve by paying 40%, 50% as well.
We'll take our next question from the line of Ajit Kumar of Ambit Capital. Please go ahead.
Thank you for the opportunity. So again on this sourcing, is this jump in the open market sourcing to 62% from normal 45 to 50% driven by co-branded partnership or normal open market sourcing? So could you please provide a breakup between co-branded and retail within this open market sourcing? You used to provide this data earlier.
Okay, we do not give the breakup among the channels in open market. But what I can tell you is that when we look at our total open market sourcing, our co-brand partnerships are a significant engine of growth for customer acquisition. So they do contribute a larger chunk. The other element is that the mix at any point of time also depends upon how the environment is. For example, in that quarter when the malls get shut or the organized retail stores shut, then for example the fuel co-brand could sell more. But in the time when the organized retail stores open back again, then the situation normalizes. So the mix changes in terms of how it is among the various constituents. So it's a large component, but we don't give the exact breakup among the different channels in open market.
Okay, thank you. So is there any difference in the sourcing cost per card between this co-branded and retail channel within this open market?
So you're asking co-brand and retail. Co-brand is a retail or an open market card itself. So in terms of co-brand, open market versus banca, there's a difference, in terms of the cost of acquisition per card. Cost of acquisition in open market tends to be on the higher side than banca, because in banca we get a lot more information from the bank and we can run pre-approved programs. Within open market, there are different channels in terms of telesales, e-apply, co-brand, and the normal point of sale. And those costs stay in a certain, these are 4 different cost elements within open market within a small range of each other, but we don't, specify that value. What I can tell you is that open market cost of acquisition is higher than banca.
Thank you. Our next question is from the line of Saurabh from JP Morgan. Please go ahead.
So just 2 questions. One is this stage 2 book, one is what is your normalized level of stage 2 book? Shall we take that Q4 number as a normal number? And is this restructured assets is over and above the stage 2 book, correct? The restructured non-NPA asset.
No, that's part of the stage 2.
Okay. And what will be the normalized stage 2? Like, I'm just trying to compare what will be against this 12%. What's the baseline number, let's say, you had experienced in fiscal 18 or 17?
So pre-COVID, it was in the range of about 8%.
8%. Okay. And the second is, so generally on the interchange fees, so what we're seeing is an MDR pressure in the market. Have you experienced any interchange fee, or do you think that thing could be under some pressure because the MDRs are coming down, or you don't think that's going to happen for the card companies?
So our interchange are broadly fixed and they've been consistent. If there is a change, the minor change happens on a month-to-month basis depending on the scenario. Because typically, for example, utilities will maybe carry slightly lesser interchange compared to if somebody buys mobile from an online store. But if you buy a mobile from an online store or mobile from a POS, we get the same interchange. So there is no difference there. So the mix, and depending on the monthly scenario and overall scene, it does make some bit of change, but we have seen it consistent for last 1.5, 2 years, 3 years.
Okay, so you've not seen any interchange issue. Okay.
MDR can be negotiated between the acquirer and the merchant, so that is a very different thing.
Yeah, no, fair. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Our next question is from the line of Dhaval Gada from DSP. Please go ahead.
Hi. 2 questions. First is, what percentage of the EMI book gets converted at the time of purchase at POS? And the second one was, could you give the EPP number, outstanding number, and provision on that? Yeah,
so on the first part, I just answered that some time back. We have not given the breakup of that asset into what it is. But what I also, along with it, we stated that of the new spends which happen every month, we see close to 10% of them getting converted into installment lending products.
Okay.
On the EPP, Aparna?
I don't have it. How much is it? 300 odd. Yeah, about 300 odd crores is EPP.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Our next question is from the line of Nitin Agarwal from Motilal Oswal Securities. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for the opportunity. Couple of questions. So, firstly, if you look at the average ticket size of UPI has been increasing from 1,200 in FY18 to now 1,900. So, what is really driving this ticket size increase for UPI payments, and how much of this, in your view, is driven by market expansion or, say, substitution?
So UPI ticket size, we don't have that detail on that data as to where the transactions are happening, because we are not on the UPI platform. However, the P2M that we hear that is getting declared there is close to around 17-18%. So majority of it is P2P still there. So 1700-1800 is a good decent ticket size for small ticket transactions which are for people giving money to each other from that perspective. But that visibility we don't have as to why the ticket size is moving up or down. But it's been quite stable at 1800-1900 for some time now.
Okay. And secondly, on the presentation slide 10, wherein we have given the spend categories, there is a decline across all the categories, a double-digit decline. Category 2, 3, and 4 ranging between 10 to 48%. And but overall retail spends are down 9%. So what is balancing this? So is category 1 very big in size in terms of proportion of spends?
Yes, you're right.
So how much could this be, approximately, in terms of overall spends?
So we have not given that breakup, but as you have rightfully figured out that the overall spends on a quarter-on-quarter basis are not down by that much. We are instead of 29,000 crores, we are around 27,000 something crores. Okay, so it's in that range, and online actually has grown in the, which we also said. We are not given the exact breakup of these because these mix is departmental stores usually is a very large category. And this is after we have taken out fuel. If you look at the disclosure there, fuel and automotive we have taken out because they are dependent more on what is the price of fuel at that point of time, and that is a growing category.
Okay. And lastly, just the write-off number, if you can mention it for the within the GNPAs, how much we have written off.
Sorry. The GNPA, within the GNPA, so GNPA is the non-written off greater than 90.
The movement of NPAs basically.
So our NPA was 4.99% on a gross basis as of March. That has come down to 3.91%.
No, but the composition of it in terms of slippages, reductions by way of write-offs.
Yeah, I think unlike a bank, we don't do that type of disclosure where we use slippages, then upgrades, increase in the NPA balances. Typically, that is the way the banks do, but we have never given that kind of disclosure. But we give a kind of picture around what are the gross write-offs and what is the recovery. Of course, the opening balance and closing balance will be there.
Thank you. We'll take a next question from the line of Jay Mundra from B&K Securities. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I have two questions. One is, while credit card is technically, kind of a BNPL product only, but do you have a separate BNPL product, or is there any restriction in your charter or maybe, from your parent that you can, do you have a BNPL product as of now, apart from this main offering?
No, we don't. As you rightly mentioned, credit card actually is the true original BNPL product because in this case you can buy and then pay either in revolving terms on your own or pay in 3 months installment or 6 months, 9, 12. The choice is with the customer, but we don't have a separate BNPL product as of now.
Right. And is there any restriction in your charter or maybe, your understanding with parent?
What we can issue is a credit card, and so any BNPL type of product that, if at all we build, will be in the lines of credit card, because that's what we can do.
Sure, sir. And the last question, sir, management overlay, is this your over and above IRAC sort of provisions, or this is just purely those provisions which have not been netted off in computing PCR? Or so is this over and above what is dictated by IRAC, or this is purely those provisions which have been set aside without, which does not go into PCR?
So we provide as per the Ind-AS norms, not IRAC. So the model throws up a number. Whatever we provide in addition to the model is what is the management reserve.
Which is already there in PCR calculation, right?
Yes.
Sure, ma'am. Thank you and all the best.
Thank you. We'll take our next question from the line of Ravi Singh from Motilal Oswal Asset Management. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so just one question on the retail spend insight slide. So this spend categories other than category 1, what are the trends you are witnessing in the second half of June and July so far after the unlocking started? And based upon this trend, what sort of normalization are you expecting? Do you think it will be a quick recovery in the spend level, or it will be a longer recovery?
So on the spend side, what we have seen is that till the first week of June, it was quite soft. It started picking up actually as the rolling lockdown started to finish. So it is actually the second half of June which was very strong, where this started to pick up and become better. We are seeing that July is coming out better than June, and it is stronger than June. So it is only after 15 June that the things have started to pick up.
Right. But in the second half and July so far, trends are strong enough to suggest recovery in the spends in category 2, 3, 4?
So see, as of now it is quite early, but what we have seen in July is quite strong.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, that was the last question. I would now like to hand the conference over to Mr. Rao, MD and CEO of SBI Cards, for closing comments. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, Rituja, let me close the call by reiterating our business fundamentals are very robust, and we follow all healthy financial and corporate governance principles which form our core strength. We continue to closely monitor the situation, take all measures to minimize the risk and ensure a sustainable growth. The first quarter results I shared with you reflect our stability and growth potential. So lastly, the need of the hour is for all of us to remain safe and extremely cautious while pursuing our personal and professional endeavors. So thank you and stay safe.
Thank you, members of the management. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of SBI Cards and Payment Services Limited, that concludes this conference. Thank you for joining us, and you may now disconnect your lines.